We had the Lieutenant Governor of Guam call into the show yesterday, and I really, if you're judging by the comments, it just, finger on the pulse of the public. I think that him coming out and answering, trying to answer some of these questions that we had about the muting of the media and the procurement of the quarantine hotels and facilities, and so he had basically apologized to the people of Guam. He said that he was going to expect an apology from the communications director, Janela Carrera, and policy advisor, Carlo Branch. And we actually got that apology from Carlo yesterday. I'm going to play it up here for you guys.
To say to you, Chris, that I think three groups of people are owed an apology. First and foremost is the reporters who participated in that press conference. The fact that I gave an instruction which resulted in them being cut off or them feeling like their right under the First Amendment was not respected is completely my fault. I should give better instruction, and I'm responsible for that. The people of Guam deserve an apology because we can constantly point to examples in our history of people who work for the government and think that they shouldn't be subject to scrutiny. And I never wanted to be one of those people, and that's wrong. And third, I extended my personal apology to the Lieutenant Governor and to the Governor. And the Lieutenant Governor had the strength and moral fortitude to apologize to the people of Guam on the radio this morning the moment he was asked the question. The fact that I had to wait for reporters to ask me the question shows that I'm not as brave and forthright as he is. So those who serve the Governor and Lieutenant Governor have to serve them well, and that day was not one of my better days.
Okay, well, let's see if what do you think, Carlo? Is today one of your better days?
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time.
Is today one of your better days?
I hope so. I try to wake up doing better than I did yesterday. I don't always succeed, obviously, but
I mean, who does?
I try.
So I guess, appreciate that apology. We had a lot of comments, and people were kind of saying that, oh, why is he apologizing? It should be someone higher up. Do you anticipate that we might get an apology from the governor, maybe?
As you have told me on more than one occasion, the governor speaks for the governor. So I know that at 1 o'clock today, she will have a press conference on a couple of matters, and that she has agreed to take all questions for as long as they are reasonably given. So, I expressed my apology to her, to the people of Guam. The reason I took responsibility is because I am responsible. There is no higher person who is responsible. And I know, Chris and Sabrina, both of you have had management, and, usually the person who is responsible for the people below them makes the apology, and so I apologize to the governor and lieutenant governor, and I apologize to Chris, particularly to the KOAM family and to anyone who was offended, hurt, or made to feel like their First Amendment privileges under the First Amendment rights under the Constitution were violated. That was not my intent, nor was that my instruction, but it was the way it was carried out, and I'm responsible for that, given obviously my instructions were not clear enough.
But I mean, I guess you're responsible, for it to a certain point. But in that live setting, the governor could have at any time overrode your decision. But I want to just kind of go back.
I want to make that clear. I think she could have overrode my decision had she understood and had she known about the decision. But I made clear with you, I made clear with the Post yesterday, and I should have made clear with you that neither the governor nor the lieutenant governor were aware at any point. So, obviously...
Yeah, Carlo, but they were asked the questions and they didn't answer. So, I mean, I think that they need to also be held... lieutenant governor already fell on the sword, but let's be real. At any point, the governor could have said, no, they're asking a question. I mean, it looked like she knew what the plan was.
Sure. So I think what happened, Chris, and again, I take responsibility for it, is that what was told to the media beforehand, as I understood it, and I rewatched the tape yesterday before giving you my apology, was that, the staff did say that any question media had outside of those topics would be answered. So those questions were answered in writing as we had promised. So I think the governor's assumption was that we were going to get to everybody's questions, as we did, in writing in accordance with the ground rules that were set out. Now, what I think was incorrect, and what I do apologize for, is the muting of media. I think everyone has a right to answer their question, and if the response is we don't have an answer for you at this time, but we'll get you an answer. I think that is fair and appropriate, but I do not in any way believe that it is appropriate to mute a question before it is fully asked. Now, sometimes there are technical difficulties, and we generally try to remediate those. I know that when the first question was asked by the KOAM reporter on Thursday, either the mic dropped out or the mute button was inadvertently hit. I don't know which one. And then she was able to come back on and finish her question. But I think she was.
But she was also not given the second question, Carlo, right? According to your ground rules.
Instances that was wrong.
Yeah. See, she also wasn't given a second question, so you guys, muted her, let her finish asking the question, said, "No, we're not going to answer that," and then she never got that second opportunity.
Right, and so obviously I have admitted that was wrong and that was poor execution, and there are no excuses for it. And today at the press conference, the governor will take everyone's questions for as long as there is reasonable time.
What is reasonable time? Because as far as I understood, that you guys were offering one-on-one interviews for every single media after the press conference.
Sure. So I think I let I don't know if it was Chris and Mindy, but several media have asked us for one-on-one interviews. So it was also an opportunity that we gave to KOAM and others. Some people like to ask their questions in groups. Some wanted to ask their questions individually on camera or via Zoom. So that was an opportunity. But we had always said that we would take questions at the press conference relative to the subjects of the press conference. I had also made
No, that was not always said. That was just one day on the recovery plan.
I'm sorry.
Okay, you can see our frustration, Carlo, is that when we don't have an opportunity to ask questions, or when we do and it's a one question, one follow-up, you're muted on the answer, so you can't come back and say, "Hey, Governor, you didn't really answer the question," or "Wait, could you clarify that?" I mean, to defend this, the whole process of these Zoom press conferences, it's really a disadvantage for the media, because we're getting muted. I mean, you muted us Thursday, but you guys mute us every press conference. We're on mute. We ask a question, we get muted. So I don't want to gloss over just Thursday, because this is something that has been the norm. We're not afforded an opportunity to come back and say, "Hey, you didn't answer that question," or "Hey, can you kind of explain that, because that's not what so-and-so said." And so I know now that you guys have decided that, we're going to let you guys ask as many questions as you want, but I just want to say that it wasn't just Thursday. Mm-hmm. I mean, every time you guys set on a notice for this press conference, it says right there, reporters will be muted.
Sure.
And GVB had a thing, and they said, "Oh, please mute yourself." Like, they actually treated the participants like adults.
So I want to make clear why that was done, so that you understand, my thinking. And then I also want to make clear that will not be done in the future. The reason that it was done is the first 3 press conferences, and each of you can go back and review the tape for yourselves. There were specific instances in which the person who asked the question before the current questioner had not muted themselves, and it caused feedback in each one of the broadcasts, to the point that the person who was currently asking the question could not be heard. And so we were advised, even by some members of media, that when a person finishes asking their question, they should be muted from an audio perspective, so that the current questioner is not interfered with. And so, when the instruction to mute individuals after their question had been fully finished was given, it was not in an attempt to abridge media. It was an attempt to be fair to the next questioner, who had a right for his or her question to be fairly understood.
No, I get the, coming from an audio production, but I get the technical side of it, is that, people were talking over each other, and you're right, the first couple were rough. But again, I just got to say that when we asked the governor, or, Linda, or whoever's in the press conference, a question, and then you're muted, they throw out their answer, and there's just you can't respond, you can't. And in a normal interview, and I know these aren't normal times, but in a normal interview, I would be able to say, "Hey, Governor, can you clarify that?" Or, "Hey, you didn't really answer the question. Can you go back and maybe address it more specifically?" But again, that opportunity is not being afforded, and then so we're stuck with these half answers sometimes, and no opportunity in a real setting other than a text message to get more information on it.
Sure, and I am clearly apologizing for the way things were done, and we are trying to adopt a policy that does them better. The idea behind the follow-up question was so that the main question could be clarified. I also understand that that is not enough time to ask for a full and thorough answer, and that's why there will not be time limits artificially placed on today's press conference. But the reason that was done was to balance out the fact that for the first time in a long time, as many as 6 to 8 media are asking a question and a follow-up. That's a total of 16 questions. And so none of this was done in an attempt to limit media or media scrutiny. If we wanted to limit media scrutiny, I don't think we'd have press conferences every day. And I know that, I just looked at it last night. There are only 2 jurisdictions that I can find that have done press conferences as often as we have done them. I will clearly admit that we are not doing them as well as we should. And we have always said publicly that this is a process where we hope we get better every time. And so I admit that, that there was a clear failure on our part last week, and I admit that we can and should do them better, and that's why I'm here talking to each of you as a man, taking responsibility for what went wrong and trying to adopt a way where we do it better.
Okay, well, we feel so lucky to have these press conferences. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous, Carlo. I mean,
all right, but just moving forward for today's press conference,
that's
because I know there were
one.
Discussions about let's do this one-on-one interview with the governor, with all the media. She has all the time to do that with, would you say 6 media that are on Guam? And we suggested that we don't need to have a one-on-one interview when we could take the time and do it after this press conference so that we don't have to create an entirely new Zoom conference because we have her. And that's something that I discussed with Mindy from the Post.
Sure.
And it's something that we are willing to do. So I just want to make sure that during today's press conference, everybody gets their one question, one follow-up. Are you extending the press conference so that we can have our interview with the governor?
So,
or is it you only get 2 questions, boom, we're done?
No. So as I said, the governor will take questions for as long as there are questions, right? And so I'm willing to take we're willing to take suggestions from you. The original way that we thought maybe we could do it fairly was everybody gets 1 question, 1 follow-up for as many rounds as there are questions. So if there is A, B, and C, you still go in order A, B, and C, but we do as many rounds as there are questions. And if one news group doesn't have many more questions, then they're out for that round because they've chosen to be out. And if KOAM and the Post have more rounds of questions, then they alternate turns until such time as those questions are exhausted. And so I was going to, send out a question. I was going to ask Janella to let people know that is how we were thinking of doing it, so that one person doesn't ask 12 questions in a row, and maybe, it isn't as fair for everybody else. But we're thinking of keeping the round system with a main question and a follow-up for as many rounds as you have questions. And so, Bree, and I just want to make clear that 30-minute interviews were not in an attempt to, abridge anyone. Separate media, other than KOAM and the Post, asked for 30-minute interviews after the press conference or beforehand. That was an offer on our part to allow for equal time. Obviously, because if we had given your competitors 30-minute interviews with the governor alone,
I mean, the governor does that every morning, though.
I'm sorry, you could then be with me the next morning saying that we had not offered you the same opportunity.
Right.
So that's all I mean.
Okay. So I guess we'll ask all our questions during this press conference this afternoon while we are live, and we don't have to establish a whole nother Zoom conference.
Sure, and if that's I can obviously that is a choice you can have, and we're open to that. So the governor will take as many questions as there are questions to be taken. And again, I am personally sorry for everything that happened last week. We are trying to do better. Mm-hmm. I understand the frustration and anger that you have, and we have a job to do, and that is to try to navigate our way through this crisis, and we respect that you have a job to do. And I've been here taking all of your questions. I will continue to do that. I've never dodged either of you.
Carlos, stand by. We're KUAM FM, Hagåtña, Guam. By the way, thanks for jumping on to our KUAM TV 11 broadcast. It's the KUAM News Takeover. containing COVID, Guam's favorite I-94. Sorry, brother. Okay.
The lieutenant governor, he was first. He came on the show yesterday. He apologized, and he said that, you would be apologizing. Are we getting an apology? Is the people of Guam getting an apology from the communications director, Janela Carrera?
So, Janela can... I am responsible for it because...
Okay, so that's a no. All right, thanks.
We just anticipated because she's the communications director, and clearly this was a communications issue.
Sure, and Chris, I know that that Bree didn't find that answer satisfactory, but I just want to explain.
I don't think the people of Guam find it satisfactory.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking on,
It's
Bree
not
knows
really-
everything. No.
It's not really us, man. It's just the people, and the comments, again, going off. It's really pretty simple. Ask one question at a time. I guess they're referencing your explanation for why reporters are muted in the first place. It's just a bonehead decision, Carlo. I don't know any other way to put it.
And I am taking full responsibility for that bonehead decision. And it was under my instruction, and those instructions did not get implemented well, and that was my fault.
But again,
So
I think
I
also
don't ask for other people to take responsibility for errors in my judgment, and and that is why I have apologized, because I was in charge. I made the call, and I am apologizing.
All right, so let's move on.
Okay.
Okay.
If you have any other questions, I'm still here.
Yeah, I wanted to know, the governor's son-in-law, Attorney Haig Hewen, the legal counsel, is he the chief procurement officer for the government of Guam?
No, ma'am, he is not.
Okay, so what is his role in procurement for the COVID response?
So his role was to negotiate contracts on behalf of the governor using her emergency power under the public health crisis statute.
The public health crisis statute?
Is that
Public
the,
health
so?
emergency statute
Right, yeah.
under Title 10.
So, Carlo, let's just go back when there were other typhoons or disasters. Was it always the governor's lawyer who facilitated and organized all this stuff? So, for example, when there was a storm during Governor Eddie's time, was it Arthur Clark out there, procuring stuff, or because
No, Arthur Clark's role was as chief policy advisor. He was never legal counsel.
Okay, or the legal counsel.
Governor Calvo had various legal counsels at different points, so I do not know how.
Is it normal though, Carlo? Because I feel like we have a chief procurement officer, and so I just want to say, is it par for the course for the governor's legal counsel to be out here procuring all this stuff? Under what authority? Is it just because he works for the governor?
Sure. Let me answer both of those questions
Okay.
directly. Under what authority? Under the existing statute, Title 10, relative to public health emergencies. We have said, more than once that the governor has the authority, in order to respond to an emergent need, to suspend or to suspend a rule or statute, and that is because that public health emergency power recognizes in some cases that the traditional method of law does not work to respond to an emergency quickly. So, as an example, I remember waking up on a Wednesday morning, reading in international press that President Duterte was throwing out, or ordering the removal of all foreigners, including returning residents to Guam and people who were transiting through Guam. That happened, I believe, on a Wednesday morning. That order was effective 72 hours from that point, so, around Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. At that point, the need to expand quarantine facilities was emergent and expedient and absolutely necessary. So the governor has invoked under Title 10 her authority to abrogate particular statutes in order to respond to this pandemic. That is the response to the authority question. Number two, what is the appropriate role for legal counsel? In this case, legal counsel negotiated the terms and general need for these quarantine facilities, and he did so at the instruction of the governor. And the governor has the authority to do that, most especially in an environment where traditional procurement law does not apply, because under Title 10 you have a public health emergency. For example, clearly those of us who have history in the government recognize that it takes more than 3 days to negotiate any contract. In fact, average contracts may take more than 3 months. In fact, the contract for telephone services in the government of Guam was in negotiation and procurement hell for 10 years. So the idea that you can use traditional procurement with all of its restraints to respond to an emergency in which a foreign president says all of your residents must be out in 3 days isn't practical, and the law recognizes that fact.
So this isn't something that the Guam General Services Agency, Guam Homeland Security, Office of Civil Defense could not handle? Because I thought, according to the pandemic annex, that GHS OCD is responsible for procurement.
Yes, ma'am. But again, remember, I mentioned to you that under Title 10...
I get it. She gets superpowers. But I'm just saying, using those superpowers, wouldn't she designate
rules,
it to people who have experience in dealing with the emergencies, such as Guam Homeland Security and Office of Civil Defense, which is included in the pandemic annex of the Guam Emergency Management Plan? Which, didn't you help write this?
I did help write it in 2008, yes.
How much experience does the governor's son-in-law legal advisor have in terms of procuring during emergencies?
Like many attorneys, he does not. I want to make clear, he is not procuring. He is, involved in the negotiation and framing of agreements, which was something.
Actually, I think there was an email. He said, "I have already procured." Was in your story, Bree? He said something like, "I have already procured these items, waiting for the necessary documents to catch up later." So in his mind, he's procured stuff.
Sure, and again, remember, lawyers think of the word procurement differently from you and me. I think when we are thinking procurement, we are thinking the traditional procurement process. And I don't want to speak for him.
We should just be able to speak. I mean, he can't call up Carlo and just answer our questions.
I can't speak for anybody but myself, Chris. You're asking me questions, I'm answering them.
Okay, so since you are speaking for yourself, Carlo, you're the Chief Policy Advisor to the Governor of Guam.
Yes.
You helped write this pandemic annex, and it says...
2008, yes.
In 2008, well, this says December 2016, so I guess 2008.
I wasn't involved in any of the edits. I wasn't a big friend of the administration in 2016.
Okay, so in 2008...
Yes.
And you just said that, you helped write this, and it does say that GHS OCD would be responsible for procurement during a pandemic. Did you, as a chief policy advisor, advise the governor that, no, we should probably follow this process, stick with the pandemic response plan, go to GHS OCD, and handle procurement, as opposed to her saying, I got superpowers, Title 10, yes, let my son-in-law handle that?
Okay, so relative to 2008, I can tell you that in 2008, relative to the pandemic response plan, that it was contemplated that a governor would need to invoke her powers under Title 10, and that at certain points, depending on the type of pandemic, the governor would need to use extraordinary authority, and that is why she has it. And it is because even under the existing processes for Homeland Security...
You said contemplated. Was it put in writing in the plan that you helped write?
It need not be put in writing at that point because those statutes were already in play, right? That was authority she already had.
So why have a plan?
In 2008 had, so Governor Camacho and...
So why have a plan if we're not going to follow it?
Yeah, Carlo, I was talking with someone who's got a lot of experience with the EOC a couple days ago, and their take on this whole thing was that this should have just been run through Homeland Security, Civil Defense. Now, we've seen the emails from Charles Estevez to Lester Carlson saying, hey, just heads up, some of this stuff doesn't jibe, and we've been told that FEMA is now saying that the way things are right now, we're not going to get reimbursed for it. So clearly there's a problem. Your own lieutenant governor said that this whole procurement raised red flags for him. And he's got experience with FEMA. He's got, experience with disaster procurement.
He's a former GAR.
Yeah. I mean, well, you're saying one thing. We just have a chorus of many other people, including sitting senators, who have major problems with this procurement, not procurement.
Sure.
So let me just ask you, is there any accuracy to the statement that are there any funds that need to be certified through civil defense or Charles Esteves? And what can you tell us about these funds being? Is there any issue with somebody not wanting to certify funds?
I'm sorry, I don't know that I don't know that I clearly understand the question. If you could repeat it.
Do these contracts need to be certified by Charles Esteves? Any funds that are going to be spent for COVID-19, anything that is procured, does it need to be approved, signed off on by Charles Esteves? Is he the GAR? Or that was Tony
It was
Babalza?
Tony, yeah. So who's the GAR now, Carlo?
I'm not 150% sure on Charles's exact role under federal law, so I don't want to comment on something I'm not an absolute expert on.
Right. But he kind of seems like he knows what the process should be, and I think that if you look at the emails with him and Lester, he's saying, hey, there's some things here that aren't, following the FEMA procedure. So how would you, I guess that would be the question, how do you respond to these comments from people that this whole process is not going to, as it is right now, is not going to stand up to the federal scrutiny for reimbursement?
Well, I would say that I think that this process, when it is clearly looked at by an unbiased third party, whether that's a federal auditor, a local auditor, or a FEMA reimbursement person, I think they will, in reading local statute and federal rules, understand that this process does pass muster, was unique, and is consistent with law.
Title 10.
Do you guys have there's no contract according to the AG?
Sure, and so I think what we have said to you in the past is under Title 10, that process can continue. There can be terms and agreements agreed to, subject to a final contract being in place. And this is not completely without example. I was made aware by others that when the federal government procured the use of hotels for the Theodore Roosevelt, they agreed to terms, negotiated amounts, but did not yet, and still do not, have a final contract in place. That was because federal law itself recognizes the need to move in an emergency manner, with the fact that contracts will be finalized at a point when that time allows.
So I'm just want to make sure I'm completely clear. So the governor's son-in-law, the legal counsel, is in charge of negotiations for these quarantine isolation facilities?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up just a little. Go ahead and repeat that one more time.
Was the governor's son-in-law in charge of negotiations for the quarantine isolation facilities?
My understanding was that he did negotiate the terms and agreements, yes. But he negotiated those terms.
Okay. What is Perlis Court for?
Wow, Carlo Branch at a loss for words. I never thought. Go ahead, Carlo.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Perlis Court. What was he negotiating Perlis Court for?
So my understanding of the use of the facility at that time was that was for medical personnel, either doctors and nurses, who worked in the COVID isolation facilities. That is, they were specifically exposed to patients who were declared positives.
So that's a condo complex, right?
If we're talking about Perlis Court near Greyhound,
yeah.
Yes, I believe that is the one.
Yeah, that's the only
Was
one.
it ever used?
I believe at some. I will have to get back to you on the answer to that.
Right.
My recollection is that it was, but I was not intimately involved with.
That's why we would like to talk to Hai. I mean, if he could call up here, that'd be great. So, Carlo,
I'm here.
I know, but you're not Hai, and you don't know. So you just said you don't know.
But I was.
Why don't you get us the guy who knows? It's simple, simple. But just going back to Perlis Court, if you do know, how did Perlis Court get involved? They're not a member of the Guam Hotel Restaurant Association, and I know that initially the use of these hotels, quarantine facilities, the negotiations were with GHRA. So I'm kind of wondering, how did this condo complex, who's outside of GHRA, how did they get a or whatever? They don't have a contract. How did they get money? I mean, did someone, shoot up a flare?
I don't know that they got money yet. I'm not versed on who did or didn't.
Okay.
I do know that there were 2 call-outs to GHRA, and that we did business with everyone who responded under the budget price. Relative to Perlis Court, I don't have individual knowledge of that. I'm more than willing to get you an answer. But Chris, if you just allow me the the ability to respond. I came here being willing to answer questions of myself, right? And the reason that I do not have answers to questions that you would ask high is I am not high. And so I'm willing to answer any question that I have knowledge to, and I'm doing that right now.
But you were willing to answer questions yesterday with the off the record interview with Haig and Sophia, and then with the caveat of, well, I'll answer on the record in writing after the off the record interview. So how could you not speak now?
Sure. As you stated yourself, Bree, that it would have also been Haig and Sophie, and they would have answered to what they could have answered, and I would have answered to what I could have answered.
So why couldn't we have done that on the record? If you did,
I just got to say
I just
though,
don't
Carlo,
want to
that
waste
is
my time
like
with off the record interviews.
that is
It
just
makes no sense.
nonsense. In what world does the governor's legal counsel only agree to do an off the record interview? I mean, okay, who was Eddie's legal counsel? Who was Governor Eddie's legal?
Depends on the year.
Sandra Miller. Let's say Sandra Miller. I could never in my wildest dreams imagine Sandy Miller saying, oh yeah, I can do an interview, but it's only going to be off the record, and any part you want on the record, this other guy is going to answer for me, maybe in writing. It's just insane that you would even offer us an off the record interview with the governor's son-in-law legal counsel. I don't understand. I mean, I feel like he gets paid $120,000 a year. He should be able to stand in and defend this work. And I don't, instead of getting you don't know anything about the procurement. I don't understand why.
I don't see how you don't know. You're the chief policy advisor of the governor.
Let's get the guy who's calling the shots.
Yeah, I'm the chief policy advisor, but I'm not legal
But
counsel.
just why can't we get high? I don't understand. Why can't we get high on the record to answer questions? I mean, I'm assuming he's going to do it at the legislature.
Chris,
Just,
Bree,
why,
you asked
Carlo?
me, and I'm here.
Okay.
And that's
I know,
it.
I know,
So has anybody been paid? Any hotel been paid?
I do not know as a matter of absolute certainty. I am willing to get you that answer, whether it's on the radio or in writing, any way you like it.
Okay.
So
Okay, so
how, how can we, I just want to go back to, can you just tell the people of Guam why the governor's son-in-law, legal counsel, who's paid over $120,000 a year to do his job, why he can't come out here and defend this procurement that a lot of people are saying is questionable? Linda DeNorcy's signature was used without her knowledge or approval. I mean, there's just so many red flags, Carlos, so I don't understand why we don't get high to call in. Why isn't there an opportunity for him to address these things on the record? It just seems kind of ludicrous that he's the guy who's going around negotiating all this stuff on behalf of the governor, but he can't, call in and answer some questions. It is. I mean, come on, you can see it.
Chris, again, as I've said, I am here. I am answering questions. I understand your concern, and I will relay them, but I can speak for myself.
I mean, this would just be so easily solved if you guys threw high out there in the press conference and he was like, here I am, who's got questions? Not this like, let me do an off-the-record interview and then Carlo's going to bail me out when it gets tough.
Well, I don't know that I could bail you
Oh,
out.
come on, Carlo.
Okay, so Carlo, we get it. You can't answer. You can't
Okay,
answer on behalf
all right,
of high.
So I guess what we want to know is who has been paid, how much they've been
He's
paid.
gonna get that for us.
Right. I'm just no.
So just currently, what
Yes.
facilities are being used for quarantine isolation facilities today? We have Paxstar.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. I believe that's a quarantine facility, not an isolation.
Oh well, the document with Linda's signature on it said quarantine/isolation facility.
Sure, but your question to me was which ones are being used today as a quarantine facility.
Okay, quarantine/isolation facility.
Okay, so I will get you an accurate list. I can give you now based on my individual recollection.
Okay, so what facilities that High negotiated are still being used today?
My understanding is that obviously we are using the Paxstar as the main quarantine facility, and there are one, maybe two other facilities, and I will get you the exact names.
Right.
I just don't want to mention the name and be inaccurate or wrong.
Well, I saw at Days Inn there were some guards people out there yesterday. So
And
then
Days Inn is the government's isolation facility, ISO, right?
if you could also tell us maybe the number of people in the facilities. So for like Paxstar, we heard.
When we answered Adriana's question, I believe the answer we gave her relative to Paxstar was 100, and 40 individuals.
Right, yeah. So then I guess for Days Inn or whatever other facilities, Perlis Court, we'd also want to know how many people are, because, you know, if you're renting an empty hotel and there's like 2 people in it.
Sure. You know, and we did give Adriana answers to this question on that same day as the press conference. Her 2-part question was, you know, 1, how many individuals were there, and 2, why do you need the additional space?
Right.
There is a clear answer on why you need the additional space. It is in part because 2 things. Number 1, we have no scientific data on whether or not there could be a second wave relative to reinfection or resurgence. So if individuals do not have a suitable facility for isolation at home, you will need an isolation unit even if there are empty rooms. Second, we have received notice, and I think you have reported at times, on the fact that certain airlines are beginning to contemplate travel back to Guam. We have been clear that the governor does not have the authority to shut down the airport. Governor Ige of Hawaii also tested it and did not have the authority to shut down the main Hano airport. And so if flights begin to come into Guam without the ability to conduct rapid testing in infected countries, you will need potentially larger isolation units or quarantine facilities. And we are still in PCOR 1, and there may be the need to use that additional space.
I wanted to follow up on something that you talked to Chris about over the weekend with respect to Rebecca Respicio and Alice Tyron. Rebecca, she's the director of the Guam Energy Office. Tyron is the president of the Guam Housing Corporation. And you confirmed that they were staying at the Pac Star because I guess they're 24/7 and they respond to the 140 quarantined individuals that are still at the Pac Star. So do we have directors of government agencies also at these other quarantine facilities, isolation units that are staying at the hotel 24/7 to address the needs of people that are staying there?
My understanding is that there is staff support. There has been staff support at the other facilities. I don't know what rank the staff is relative to any overnight support, but I'm willing to get you that answer.
Well, I mean, you have a director, and she's grabbing towels, and is that kind of like what it sounds like you said?
Well, I believe my answer to Chris was that as part of the agreement, staff members were not permitted to have contact with quarantined individuals.
The hotel staff, right?
Yes, hotel staff was not permitted to have contact with quarantined individuals. So in the absence of quarantine staff being able to run food, blankets, respond to room problems, that is government staff that is doing that.
Specifically Alice Tyron and Rebecca Respicio?
No, they have other staff that work there, right, Carlo?
Facility, yes.
There are other
My
staff.
response relative to overnight is who is doing the overnight duties. So Chris's question to me, and Chris, don't let me misstate it, was
I got it right here.
how many officials he asked me to confirm whether or not Rebecca and Alice were staying overnight at the Pac Star to staff the facility. I said yes, and that their duties were to run that facility 24/7, and that there were only, on occasion, there were usually 2 staff members to do that overnight for 140 individuals.
Right.
He asked me a third question about a third person, and I said that I could not respond directly to that question because it was HIPAA protected.
Right.
So the HIPAA protected question.
Yeah, we
Is
asked
this
why
person-
is John Kanata of the deputy of the airport staying at the Pacific Star, and you said you couldn't answer because of HIPAA.
Yes, that is what I said.
Okay, well, I think people kind of know what that means.
Yeah.
And
Hey, I
so
just
having
got
said
a
that,
tip
is
from
the Pac Star also being used as an isolation facility?
No, it is being used as a quarantine facility.
Yeah. No, I know that. That's
Yeah.
what I had
But-
thought, but
yeah,
when I
but
saw
the
the
letter-
documents,
yeah,
it said quarantine isolation.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Carlo, can you just maybe confirm this, or maybe check with Hi, or give us Hi, and we'll ask him. So I heard that, and we know this because we had interviewed Mary Rhodes. I went through some of the old clips. Is when this all started, the hotels were only supposed to be quarantine facilities, and I have learned that their contracts were changed, and now some of them are isolation facilities, which they did not sign up for. And I'm told that had they known they were going to be isolation facilities, which is a whole other risk, there would have been a separate pricing. And so what we're being told is that these contracts are being changed after the fact with no input from the hotels. They're just basically saying, oh, now you're an isolation facility. And so is it Days Inn that's the isolation facility?
That's my understanding.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
understanding at this moment.
So I just got a tip here that there are only 2 people staying at Days Inn.
Yes. I don't know the number, but I understand that you are getting that tip. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And again,
So we just keep renting this hotel in case there's a surge.
So yes, relative to that number, and we have answered that question on the record numerous times. When times are good and the number of isolations is small, of course people will go, you have so many vacant rooms at the Days Inn. But if things go the other way, or things had gone the other way, then it will be, why hadn't you prepared enough isolation rooms? And so no one could quickly predict the number, type, and size of isolation facilities you would need. And we're, of course, if the number at Days Inn is small, I think I'm personally grateful for it. But while you do not have any data on resurgence, and I think, it was reported that 5 or 6 were declared negative and have come back resurgent, while we do not have data on resurgence, and we are waiting to move to laxer conditions under PCOR 2, we do not know, and we hope we do not need larger isolation facilities, but that possibility exists.
Okay. So, Tony Babauta, how long did he stay? Was it just really that one night?
My understanding from him and from those individuals that were there was that it was one evening.
And
Friday evening to Saturday morning.
What can you tell us about, we had heard from some sources that he was driving around in an unmarked Guam Police Department vehicle, a Dodge Durango. Is that just another benefit that you get as the chief of staff, or?
I don't have specific information on that. I can attempt to check.
Okay.
And then, with Tony, right? So, was it really just that he stayed at Pacific Star? Or, because you muted the media. You caused this whole crazy backlash against this administration. You caused so much pain, so much anger, so much mistrust. People have I think they're already losing faith, but it was just another thing that people could throw out and say, man, this government is dishonest. That you made that call, Carlo, but you just got off with an apology. And we all know that Tony was pretty much forced to resign. So you see, it's kind of a different, I don't know, let the punishment fit the crime. So was it just that he stayed overnight at the hotel, or was there something else with him being the signatory for the governor?
I think we all know that I wouldn't speak for Tony. He told me, I spoke with him briefly beforehand. He said he was going for his own reasons. I have to respect that.
Okay. In terms of the negotiations again with Haig, has anything been signed, and who is supposed to sign off on these contracts at the end of the day? Is it the GAR, or is it Charles Esteves? Is it Claudia Ekfaji, or is it Haig himself?
Or is it Linda and her digital signature? Can we just address that, though, Carlo? Why was the governor's legal counsel using Linda's digital signature, or whoever was using it, without her approval or knowledge? I mean, you can't walk away from this. She is.
I can only answer one question at a time.
Okay.
I'm willing to try to answer both.
Go ahead.
Which one would you like?
We can start with mine. Who's supposed to sign off on these contracts?
Okay. Relative to contracts, my understanding is that there are multiple signatories, including the Attorney General, and usually the process is that the final signature is always the governor on a finalized contract.
Mm-hmm. Does somebody have to certify, like there's funds available to pay for this?
Under traditional procurement, that is my understanding, yes.
Okay, non-traditional procurement?
Non-traditional procurement, I wouldn't be 100%, and that's an issue of legal interpretation, so I won't try.
See, if you got us high, it would just be, hey, hi, so what's the deal? It would just be boom, boom, shoo.
I'm sorry, just repeat that one more time. You're just bringing up that last part.
Right. I mean, if you had gotten us
He
high,
said if you had gotten us
if you gotten us high, we asked him the question. And it's like over.
Done.
Easy.
I understand.
Yeah.
All I was told last last night was that you would like to speak to me, and I'm here. I don't know about you trying to interview High.
Well, come on, Carlo. I asked you, and you guys said off the record only.
Other than our previous conversation.
Right, yeah.
And I have said that
we want to interview High. Well, how else do you want me to say it? Of course we do.
Sure, I understand.
Can we put in that request right now? We'd like to speak with Attorney Hyun.
Yes, and
an
I
interview
will take that
on the record.
On the record.
Yes, I understand that it is on the record. I will.
That's how we roll, kind of.
So there was a second question. I don't recall what it was, but I'm willing to answer it.
You had the second question.
I forgot. Pretty sure it was a good one, though.
I think
If there are any other questions, I will continue to try and answer them.
Okay.
My head's just spinning right now. I don't think I have anything. Okay, I might as well ask. So did you speak with Linda or anybody speak with Linda about the digital signature? That's what he wanted. He asked.
That's what I
about.
was asking, yeah.
That she said she didn't sign, her digital signature was used.
I can go back and read her comments. I think I'm going to do that, Carlo, just to give you some context in case you haven't seen them. And this is pretty crazy. She had said, I asked her, Linda, can you confirm your signature was used without your knowledge to sign the hotel quarantine documents? Chris, I want to make it clear that I have nothing to do with quarantine properties and quarantine hotel negotiations. Yes, I recognize my signature, but it was an electronic signature, and I don't recognize this document because I have never seen it before. And then I said, Linda, do they have your permission to use your digital signature? Also, would you have signed those documents if they presented them to you for signing? Her response, Chris, the normal procedure is that I get a call from legal counsel for permission to use my signature, and if I authorize it, then the document should be sent to me. Second part of your question, no, I will not sign these documents if they presented them to me because I do not deal with procurement of quarantine and isolation facilities. Linda DeNorsi. So it seems pretty firm there that she's got a problem with you guys using her. Whoever down there is stamping her signature on stuff without her approval, that's a major problem. We had Senator Sabina Paris say it's fraud, and she's the procurement oversight. So how do you respond to that, I guess?
Sure. So it is my understanding, in accordance with Linda's comments to you, Chris, that there is a process where she will authorize the use of her digital signature upon reading of a document by legal counsel. And what I believe happened, based on my conversations with Linda, was these documents were presented to her as procurement documents relative to the quarantine facilities. It is true and accurate that these are not procurement documents. They are not documents that obligate funds or the agreement to pay monies. These are documents designating the facilities as proper facilities for non-congregate shelter. And that is shelter where multiple individuals will live and have individual bathrooms and beds but share a common area. And so when Linda was asked the question, did you sign, these procurement documents or documents obligating quarantine, it was my understanding that she rightly responded no. Then it is also my understanding that she that she does remember having signed a multitude of documents, that she does not remember these specific documents, but she does remember documents in general relative to non-congregate shelters designation. It's not procurements, not contracts, not terms.
So you're basically saying Linda was confused.
Non-congregate shelters.
You're saying Linda DeNorsi was confused.
No, I'm saying she, A, does not remember signing those documents, but B, she has never signed procurement documents, and that's true and accurate.
Right, yeah.
So my understanding from...
But I didn't ask her about procurement documents. I just asked her hotel quarantine documents. I never used the word procurement. And I actually spoke to her again yesterday afternoon to kind of, get her take on, hey, you said these things, are you doubling down, tripling down? She goes, no, Chris, those are my answers. I stand by them. So I got to go with what Linda says.
Yeah, and I'm not disavowing what Linda says either. It is my understanding that there was a process, that it did involve legal counsel and legal counsel's reading of documents to Linda for authorized use of her signature. That is my understanding of the process.
When did you speak with Linda?
yesterday morning. In the Post story yesterday, this is where I'm getting the use of the phrase procurement. I believe they phrased it as, she signed procurement documents. And I asked her if she ever did, and she said absolutely not. That's why she refused them. And I said, do you recall signing documents designating non-congregate shelter? And she said, I signed a multitude of documents, and I authorized documents every time they were read. She said, Carlo, I do not remember these specific documents. And I said, okay. And but I didn't, but she did make clear to me that she had never signed procurement documents, and I pointed out to her that those are not procurement documents.
Yeah.
That's designated
I mean, the
shelter.
point is, you're trying to clutter the point. The point is that she said that she's seen her say it wasn't supposed to be used. She didn't have approval or knowledge of it, and that's what she said. So.
Sure, and I can say to you that what she said to me, which I believe is consistent, is that she did not recall.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Well, you guys, she's saying different things to the two of you. All right. Okay.
I think she's playing us.
But definitely, Title 10 doesn't give anybody any authority, right, to use
use,
somebody else's
yeah.
digital signature.
Does High have the authority to use people's signature without their consent?
Not without their permission, no.
Okay. So is Haig negotiating anything else aside from
like
hotel
Food
quarantine?
services,
Is-
maybe? I heard something about food services that are being provided without a contract.
I don't have eyes on that particularly.
But if he got us high,
But,
we
but
would
do
be
you
able to
know
ask
if
him.
he is negotiating
Yes, I
anything else
understand
on
your-
behalf of the governor?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Do you know if Attorney Haig is negotiating anything else on behalf of the governor?
Anything else on behalf of the governor? No,
Right,
no,
but related to COVID, aside from the quarantine/isolation facilities, is he negotiating anything else?
not to my personal knowledge, but again, I'm willing to ask. So if either of you want to send me a list of things to
Why
ask
don't you
them,
just work on getting us the interview with High?
I also said that I would do that. more
Thank
than
you. I
once.
appreciate that.
Okay. So what is the plan we're going to be seeing today? We hear that it's going to deal with long-awaited public assistance, local assistance, I'm sorry.
Sure. So my understanding is that the plan will deal with a local cash assistance program relative to those who were impacted by the pandemic disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking? I heard something like $2,000 to the unemployed. Is that? Can you give us any more details on that?
I'll wait for the governor to present it at the press conference.
Mm-hmm. And what
Are
about
we
this
hot or
initiative?
cold on that, Carlo? Though $2,000.
I'm neutral on commenting on that specific matter.
What about the transparency initiative?
Sure. She will discuss that also at the press conference, is my understanding, and then walk through the various points of that plan.
Right. And then you're also going to find out for us, because you don't know, right, who's authorized to sign contracts under Title 10, High or Linda?
Oh, no, you asked me who is authorized to sign contracts. I said there are multiple signatures
Okay.
required for any GovGuam contract.
How about on
You
the
said
Title
that
10?
was traditional, but on non-traditional.
And the new way to do it.
Sure, that's a legal question. I'm more than happy to ask legal.
Or you could just get us the legal and we could ask him
Yes,
ourselves.
and I've responded that I would try 7 different times by my count.
Right. Appreciate that.
Thank you all 7 times for responding.
Yeah.
I think
Are you good?
no, I did want to ask about there's something that's here. One of our viewers on our live stream is asking about the double pay issue. I know that Senator Joe Augustini wrote a letter to Edward Byrne wanting an explanation as to why double pay has not been paid out to first responders or essential employees.
Yes, ma'am. My understanding is that the senator's response is forthcoming.
You can't respond?
That's a DOA issue, so DOA.
Well,
has
you
I mean, you're
know
sitting
you
here
know that
responding
we
to-
can't even get DOA unless we get approval from the Adelup.
And you're here talking,
And
about
I
the
believe-
procurement, with the governor's son-in-law legal counsel. It's free reign, but you can't talk about DOA.
No, I believe that we set up DOA and VVMR to appear on your show
Yeah.
tomorrow morning.
I think we got Lester tomorrow.
It was my understanding that they'd be able to answer your questions
Okay, cool.
in detail.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, Bree, I'm getting them tomorrow.
Okay.
And I believe that was arranged last night. So.
It was.
Do
yeah,
you foresee this double pay being paid out?
I think Lester and Byrne, particularly Ed Byrne, will be able to answer that for you in the morning.
Okay. I'm done, I think.
Yeah. I guess just one last question. There was a comment here. I can't find it now, but it was basically, why don't you guys put out the communications director, Janela Carrera. I mean, you've seen it in past administrations. You know, Oya was out here answering stuff, tough stuff. She was a big girl. She went out and she could face the media. But every time, you know, we need something they send you. So are you like the only guy there who knows what he's talking about? Or why don't you want to send Janela out? Because, I mean, she's the communications director.
I'm sorry, restate your question.
Why don't we hear from the communications director?
I think you...
I mean, we do. No, and I work together, the guests, I got that, but I'm just saying in a traditional setting, and, you know, again, I got to just reference the last administration, you would have, if this was a situation where, you know, I'm going to talk show or whatever, it would have been Oya, not whoever the policy guy was, and it was routinely Oya. So I'm just wondering why we don't, I mean, we're paying this communications director, why isn't she out there more saying things, you know, doing things other than introducing reporters at press conference? I think it's a fair question, Carlo.
Sure. And I'll answer it, and I could say every administration was different. I was a part of the administration beforehand, and there was a spokesperson, and there was a director of communications. And sometimes the director of communications is not acting in a spokesperson role. And so I understand that KOM is referring to the prior administration. I can point out other examples in other administrations where the director of communications was in charge of communications, but was not always on all matters the spokesperson, or wasn't even designated.
But you're neither.
Let me see.
But you're neither
Sean
the
Gumatata was the
spokesperson.
director of communications, and I believe he did interviews multiple times.
Yeah.
Sean was the
under-
director of communications in the last 2 years of the Camacho Cruz administration. There was
he
a
did-
director of communications beforehand, and you know there was a spokesperson beforehand. In fact, Sean's role before director of communications and before policy advisor was spokesperson at one point.
Right, and even when he was the director of communications, he still did interviews.
I'll just ask you this, Carlo. Are you confident that you can send Janela out to the media and she can sit in and answer the questions that we're asking you?
Your question is, am I confident in Janela? Yes.
No, it's not. It's are you confident in her to call up, to do the interviews, to, you know, face the questions that you're facing?
I'm confident in my ability to face questions on matters of policy. I am confident on her ability to communicate the administration's message, whether it's on air with you or anyone else.
Yeah, so you should get her to call in more. I mean, you know, door's always open.
Yes, and thank you for always being open to our phone calls.
Of course. You can say that with a little more gusto there, Carlo.
Oh, I haven't had coffee, and I've been holding the phone for 45 minutes.
Okay.
All right, Carlo, we'll
Yeah.
let you go. We
Yeah.
know you got a big press conference today, and
Yep.
especially we want to thank you for extending it so that we could ask our questions
Yeah.
along with the Post and I guess whoever else, what other media wants to hang on the phone or on the Zoom conference. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, and I appreciate the time to speak with you. And I know you have other questions. I know the first one is we want legal counsel. If I missed any others, you can message me, and Chris knows I always respond.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Right on. Wash your hands. 8:46. Let's keep it, man. I hope we still got Superintendent John Fernandez. Soup? Okay, I'll go get him. We'll take a little break. It's 8:45. Man, Carlo Branch, comments. What do you guys think? I think it's pretty clear.
I want to thank him, though, for coming on.
Yeah. But I mean,
Thanks,
he's like
Carlo.
the only guy they have that can go out and answer stuff. It's crazy. We're paying all these people. We're paying the governor's son-in-law legal counsel. He can't even go and answer questions.
I'm still mind blown that he's handling negotiations.
Yeah.
Because the governor
interesting.
has superpowers under Title 10, but yet we have a pandemic annex response plan that clearly says that when a pandemic occurs, that Guam Homeland Security Civil Defense, one of their main roles is to deal with procurement.
Yeah, I don't know, Bree. I felt like we had him on the phone for 45 minutes, but even more questions. Is that how you feel?
I need a break right now, okay?
We're going to take a break. Hey, it's Guam's favorite, the KUAN News Takeover containing COVID. Good morning.
Join us in salute.
Be healthy. Be informed with ITD.